Hello, friends, and welcome to The View from Laura's Window, a podcast where life is explored through positive Christian thoughts.
But there's something inside of you that says...
And when I say window, I'm referring to the view or perspective of life, of how we think, act, and react. Everyone has a window, and yes, every window has a different view. Sometimes our view may not always be clear, and it may not always be focused. But I hope through this podcast and a positive Christian mindset, you will have a much better perspective. So open up those windows, your hearts, and your thoughts to the encouraging view from Laura's perspective. Hello there, and welcome back to the podcast. I'm Laura, your host, and I'm so glad that you are here today. Today is Tuesday, and I have another great Tuesday's Talk interview where I will be joined with a guest, and we will discuss anything from those easy, lighthearted topics to asking those deep questions that make us vulnerable. Whichever direction we will go, our hope is to encourage and inspire each other and you as the listener while putting God in the heart of all the words. So, today's episode number 55 of Tuesday's Talk is with Julianne Clayton, who is a speaker and writer of the podcast called Remind Her. And Julianne lives in Tallahassee, Florida with her husband, Brad, 2 dogs, Kaylee and Clyde, and their cat Middleton. How cute is that? Julianne has a passion for words, especially God's words. Her podcast Reminder is for women, especially those who may be distracted of what their purpose in life and in God's presence may be. I'm excited to be able to talk with her today, so let's go ahead and bring her on. Hey, how are you doing, Julianne?
Hey, I'm great, Laura. How are you?
Good. It's good to be here.
Yes, you too. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to chat with you.
Well, thanks for coming on. I already introduced you earlier onto the podcast, but I was wondering if you could go ahead and tell just a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Yeah. I live in Florida. My husband and I moved here almost 4 years ago, and we live kind of in the Panhandle area. And my husband is a pastor, so I feel like my life kind of revolves around church and the community that we have there. But I work. It's kind of weird. I work at the office of another local church in the same town, and that's kind of my 8 to 5 day job. So I do that, and it's good. But my real passion is I have a passion for words. I've always just kind of said that because I love to write and I love to speak and I love to study God's word. And so most importantly though, I think I love connecting with people using words, whether that's the written word or spoken word, or even just listening to them and, where they might be struggling, that sort of thing. And so, I host a pretty much brand new podcast. It's called the Reminder Podcast. And that's been really fun for me because it allows me to be writing and speaking regularly and connecting with people. So it's been kind of the best of all of the things that I love. And so, I've been working on that. And then I, will be starting to study for my master's in Christian spiritual formation and leadership this August. So I think I register for classes next week, a week from today. So that'll be really great too, because I think that will help to deepen the well that I serve from and that I am able to lead from. So I'm excited about that opportunity as well. And we love to go to the beach. We love to travel. And mostly we just love spending time with our family and our friends, and we're pretty laid back.
So what's it like there? You're in Tallahassee?
Tallahassee, yeah.
What's it like there with the COVID-19 virus? And are you staying in, having to wear the masks?
Yeah, we've been wearing masks ever since the CDC, I think, came up with that guideline. We've been trying to follow the guidelines that CDC releases, and I'm considered an essential worker at my office, and so I've been able to work remotely for the most part. But I do have to go in a couple days a week to do some essential tasks, and it's actually really interesting because the route that I take to get to work passes by the place where they're doing the drive-up testing for the virus. And so I pass that every time I go into the office, and it's just kind of surreal. But it's just, I still have a hard time believing that this is our reality.
I know.
Yeah. But I'm trying my best to, make the best of it and find the good in it, and take it a day at a time. So.
Right. Yeah. Well, I love the name of your podcast. It's Remind Her. Is it Remind Her? How do you say it? Remind Her? Because you have the two words together.
Yeah. So I actually even wasn't sure how I wanted to pronounce it, but I found myself just saying the Reminder podcast. And then the H is just kind of inserted in there. So if you look at the graphic, it's Remind Her. So it's just this kind of subtle, tweak to the word, but yeah, it was a kind of a fun title to come up with. It just kind of came to me, which is how that to me, that's, God giving it to me. And so it's been really fun to host and to figure out all the tech stuff. And I hope that it's been serving people well so far. It's still pretty
well. I enjoy following it. I'm glad I found you.
Thanks. Yeah.
It is for women, but it's especially for those who have anxious hearts who could use a reminder for God and who He calls us to be in the middle of all this stuff. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely.
What do you mean by reminders? And why is it so important that we take notice of these daily or weekly or monthly reminders?
Yeah, definitely. I think for me, I get very easily distracted. Just with life in general, with the worry and the stress and the schedule. And I have found in my own life that there will be these moments that I think are gifts from God where I am able to refocus and pay attention to what is true and who God is and who God is calling me to be. And it's so easy for me to lose sight of those things and to forget about God's faithfulness and God's presence in my life. And so when I would have those moments for me personally, I always just called them, oh, God gave me a reminder today, or God reminded me today of, whatever the message was or the truth was. And so when I was creating this podcast, I know that a lot of, women who I am friends with struggle with the same kind of thing. And I thought, what if I created that space for women who struggle with being distracted, who struggle with the chaotic schedule? And what if I provided, a 10 or 15 minute reminder to help them focus on what is important and what is true, and just kind of give them a period of time to just breathe and remember who God is. And I think that makes all the difference in my life. And my hope through the podcast is that it will make a difference for other women too who might struggle with similar things.
And I think it does. And, before now, we were living in such a busy world, but now everybody is slowed down. So I think it's really at a good time. Everybody's into the podcast and reading and Zoom. And I think it's really a good thing to connect into on these days where we are, stuck in the house.
Yeah. And I when I originally kind of was working on the podcast, I had no idea that this pandemic would be a thing that we're dealing with right now. But it is interesting because even though maybe our schedules are a little bit simpler, I still find that I'm anxious and I still get distracted, and it's just in a different way. And so, I'm really glad that the podcast is helpful for a lot of women so far. So.
Well, I know I have my earbuds in when I go around listening to your podcast, and, I can go for a walk, I can clean, go around, do the dishes, I can do whatever, and just go on just going around doing my own thing and being, encouraged at the same time. So I really appreciate it. So
thank you.
With all the unanswered questions that everyone is facing today, how can we ourselves be a reminder to others who are in isolation and social distancing?
Yeah, I think that is such an important question. I do think that, I'm a firm believer that it's important to invest in our own personal faith and for us to be reminded ourselves. But if it's just about us, I think we might be doing it wrong. And that God calls us to more. God calls us to be those reminders. And it's kind of tricky, with all of this social distancing and isolation, because a lot of times the initial way that I think of reminding someone of God's love or God's peace, it involves me being physically present with them, and we can't do that right now. And so I think though that this is an opportunity for us to be creative with the ways in which God can use us. And I think about, obviously, we have so many medical professionals who are just sacrificing so much right now. And, maybe if you have a friend or a family member who is one of those people, write them a note of encouragement and of gratitude for the work that they're putting in. It could be, there are a lot of nonprofit organizations right now who are helping to provide food and meals for people who can't afford their own. But those staff members themselves are overextended and are working really hard. And so one of the ways that we can support them and we can be a reminder for them is maybe provide a meal for them while they're at work working to help take care of the needs in their community. It even could be as simple as, when I'm at the grocery store, my default is to just okay, I've got all of the things on my list, and now I'm going to go through the checkout line and have to get everything in my car and go home. But maybe it's, taking the time when you're in the checkout line to look that person in the eye and to say, thank you. Like, you're going above and beyond, and you're dealing with people who are highly stressed right now. And it's just, I think it's just looking for God's presence and treating everyone like they are a child of God. And, and just, it's an opportunity, like I said, I think, to be creative in the ways that God can use us right now. Cause that's what being a reminder is. It's just allowing God to use you right where you are. And so it's, those are just a few examples, but I would encourage people to think about that, and because it's important, especially in a time like this.
I think it's awesome the way that everybody is working together. Like I see on TV, how everybody is pulling together, helping each other. Yeah. Just going out of their way. Yeah. And it shows that, we as a community can do that. And God can be a big part of that. And I hate to see that it's something like this that brings that all together, but yet it's still so good to see.
Oh yeah. It gives me hope in the middle of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Many times I find myself trying to fix things on my own, but it seems like the more I try to fix it, the more I struggle, and the more I realize I need to have God do it for me. I need to go to Him first. Yeah. What do you think are some of the things that we can do to remind ourselves that that we can have a more real and open relationship with God?
Yeah, I love that question. I think, because I struggle with the same thing that you're vocalizing right now, kind of wanting to be in control and take things into my own hands and fix it the way that I want to fix it. And I think when I do that, it's almost like I'm taking God for granted and that relationship with God for granted, because, I think that first and foremost, we need to remember that we can be honest with God. You look at the Psalms and you have these psalmists who are very honest with God and talking about how they feel abandoned by God. And so if you're talking about having a very real, open relationship with God, I think that we're allowed to be honest. And so it's keeping that in mind. And I also think, as far as the relationship goes, any relationship takes work. It takes, intention and and discipline and investing in the relationship. And so I think that when it comes to our relationship with God, or just our faith in general, when we are willing to invest in it and to treat it as a priority in our lives, then we're kind of able to, I don't know, I guess feel more comfortable coming to God with the problems that we might be facing. So yeah, I think that just remembering that it is a relationship and not getting intimidated or anything like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I forgot to ask this one. This one should have been asked earlier. You also mentioned about being intentional with our faith. Mm-hmm. Can you explain what being intentional means and what does that look like?
Yeah. So I think it's a little bit of what I was just describing, but, we're all disciples of Jesus. If we're followers of Jesus, we're disciples of Jesus. And part of that is discipline. And I think about, if we are, if we're training for a race, whether it's a 5K or maybe even a marathon, or if we are learning an instrument or just any sort of new thing, we have to invest the time and we have to practice and we have to train and we have to, that's how we become better. And I think there's this mentality in our society of this instant gratification. We make a decision that we're going to do something or try something and we want it to be perfect right away. And I think that, a lot of times we're like that with our faith too. We want God to just show up. And I want to be able to feel God's presence in my life. I want to be able to see how God is working, but then we aren't necessarily willing to make our faith a priority and to, form our lives around God rather than trying to fit God into the lives we want to have.
That's so true.
Yeah,
it's true.
And so, as far as being intentional, it's not that you have to be rigid with it or legalistic with it, but for me, it's about, finding a routine or a rhythm where there is space for me to connect with God. Whatever that might look like. It could be, having an intentional time of studying God's word, or maybe not even studying it, but meditating on it, or, go for a walk and enjoy creation. Pray. I talk to God all the time throughout my day. It's not like this formal thing where I'm, sitting down and folding my hands and praying, but I feel like I'm in constant conversation with God. And so I think being intentional is just figuring out how your faith can be top of mind and how, again, we can form our lives around our faith rather than having our faith just be one other part of our lives, if that makes sense.
It does.
So,
it makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
That's a really good answer. I truly enjoyed that answer.
Yeah.
I always hear people say, and sometimes they say it at the wrong times, and they don't mean to, but they say that God doesn't give us any more than we can handle. Mm-hmm. And usually, it comes to at a time, like I said, where we're not expecting it. We don't want to hear that when something bad is going on. Yeah. Because it does to people seem kind of lame. Mm-hmm. But, what I would rather say is that God will help us with anything that we are given. Mm-hmm. But, sometimes, say, for instance, if I go into a doctor's office and I'm sitting there and I'm in that small, isolated room waiting on the doctor to come in, a lot of thoughts can go through our head. And a lot of, the environment is just so nerve-wracking when you're in there and you have no idea, you're just waiting on answers. And right now, a lot of people are waiting on answers. They're waiting to see loved ones. They're waiting on their paychecks. They're waiting to go back to work. They're waiting to see their families. They're waiting on the COVID-19 test results. Yeah. So what do you think we can do while we are waiting to reduce or eliminate the stress and anxiety?
Yeah. Gosh, waiting. I think waiting is so difficult because it almost forces us to acknowledge what is unknown. Like we like to be in control and we like to have it all together. But when we're waiting, we don't always have that option. And so all we can do is kind of look what's unknown in the face and worry about it and stress about it. And it is so difficult. But there's this, a music artist named Bethany Dillon, and she's actually married to one of the Shanes from Shane and Shane, the Christian musician duo. And there's a song called "To Those Who Wait," and in it there's one line that I just love, and she's talking to God, and it says, "You can do more in my waiting than in my doing all I can do." And I think that that's so true. In a lot of different ways, because again, we feel like we want to take control and have the answers and know what's coming next. When in our waiting, sometimes God can work even more because we're not getting in the way. You know what I mean? But as far as like practical things, especially right now, that we can do to kind of diminish that stress and anxiety that we might be feeling, I think a very practical thing, for me at least, is like turn off the news.
Yes.
Like I think it's important to stay informed. Don't get me wrong. We need to be informed, especially during a time like this, but we don't have to be informed 24/7, like have specific times when you're going to tune in to get the latest news and then turn it off, and don't feel like you have to be glued to your screen.
It's like a repeat over and over and over. And it kind of seems like you can be brainwashed after a time period of listening to it. So
exactly. Well, and it's just not, I don't know that it's the healthiest thing. I think that there are so many other things that we can focus on. And when it's just, constant news going into our ears and into our brains, I just feel like it's just heavy. And I think that it adds to the stress and the anxiety. And so that's one really practical tool that I think could be helpful. Another thing, along those same lines, but just to avoid screens. I don't know if your listeners are working or not. I know I feel like I'm on my screen now all the time. I work on my computer from home, and then when I log off of work, I'm working on my podcast or on, some other thing. I help with my church's social media accounts. And so I get notifications about all of the things that the church is posting too. And it can just be so draining. And so having set times where you're not looking at your screen and being really intentional about that, and instead maybe going outside for a walk, or just go sit in your backyard or on your porch or balcony, wherever, you have just a little bit of space to breathe. And then speaking of that too, I think being intentional about actually physically breathing is another really good practice. I don't know if you have one of those smart watches. Yeah, I have one of those, and it reminds me when I am not breathing. Like it says, "Hey, Julianne, you need to breathe."
Well, I have a Fitbit, and it reminds me in the morning. Time to get up and eat breakfast. Time to drink your water. Right.
And it's amazing to me how often it has to remind me to breathe. And I think, truly taking even just like 2 minutes to take a few 10-second deep breaths and to kind of breathe in all that you're, dealing with and all that you're anxious about and the worries that you're experiencing, and then just breathing them out and releasing them to God. I know it sounds a little wonky, but really, truly, physically taking the time to just breathe deep, is really powerful. And so that's another kind of tool that we can use when there are so many unknowns, when we're in the middle of waiting, when, all we want are answers that we can't have right now. Breathe. Don't forget to breathe,
Don't forget to breathe.
Yeah.
Which, like I said before, we're slowing down, and we don't have a choice right now but to, enjoy the moments that we have of doing nothing and breathe. So I think God has perfect timing on some things. Not that I'm saying God caused this.
Right.
God does allow things, I think, to happen.
Yeah.
And doesn't intervene for reasons. But, and I always see God coming in to play with anything that is bad or negative. I always try to find something good or positive. So
absolutely. I believe that God can use the messiest, darkest moments of our lives, like miraculously. And I think it's so true. He can take what we think is just complete garbage and he can turn it into something really worthwhile. So, absolutely.
Yes. While I was listening to your podcast and reading some of your blog posts, I found that the word purpose coincides with the idea of being reminded. And many people may be asking the question right now, they don't know what their purpose may be because, they're questioning whether they're going to go back to work with their jobs, and life circumstances change, and it changes all of us. What can you say to those who might not know what their purpose may be in all these changes? And how do we embrace the person that we are now with so many unknown and unanswered questions?
Yeah. I think that purpose, that word, can be a little bit like intimidating, and we're like, oh, what's my purpose? And I mean, I think that it is a big deal. I think that our purpose, no matter what our circumstance is always to glorify God and always to contribute to building God's kingdom, and right here on earth. That's always kind of the overarching purpose. But I do think that in different seasons of life, our the method that we use to fulfill our purpose might be different, and especially now. Like you said, maybe there's a job that we love that we're unable to do right now, or basically everything that you just described. And I think that one of the things that we can do during this time, since we have kind of been forced to slow down and simplify, is maybe just listen. Just listen for what God might be doing during this time, how God might be working. Our society is such a productive society. We love to, be productive and contribute and do. And sometimes I think our purpose is to take a step back and to reevaluate and to pay attention to, maybe just how God is changing us for the better in the middle of a difficult circumstance. And two, Frederick Buechner, he has this quote, and I'm not going to quote it perfectly, but basically that our calling or our purpose, is the place where our deep gladness meets the world's deep hunger or deep need. And so, kind of going back to what we talked about a little bit earlier about being reminders during this time, maybe maybe it's just about kind of taking a moment to listen and to say, okay, this is my circumstance, but what's my deep gladness right now? What brings me joy? What brings me, what makes me come alive? And then what need is out there right now? And how can I use how I feel like God has gifted me to then gift someone else and to meet that need. I think that that's really an important thing to do. But yeah, I think just remembering, there are going to be different seasons throughout life, and we are in it certainly a different season right now. And so the overarching purpose is the same, but our method might be different, and to be open to that and to listen to, what God might be doing and how God might be doing a new thing, for each of us. So yeah, I would say that that's probably.
That sounds, really good. I truly appreciate that answer.
Yeah.
So you're a speaker.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's probably not happening right now. Do you have anything booked for later?
I did right now. I do. It's for in June. I have a retreat that I'm supposed to speak at. I haven't heard if it's still going to happen or not. We'll see. The church that it's through is kind of taking things a couple weeks at a time, and so they haven't made a decision on it. But there's a Bible study summit that I was able to be a speaker for. It's virtual, and so that's going to be coming up in a couple weeks. So I'm, here and there, I'm able to still do that speaking. But once this is all over, I can't wait to be able to connect with people and to be able to fill that need again. So yeah,
that will be great when we all can get back out there again and start socializing.
Yeah.
So can you share with everyone where we can find you on social media?
Yeah. So I'm definitely most active on Instagram. And my handle there, it's at Jule E. Clayton. So that's JuleClayton. And so that's where I'm most active. I would also say if you want to check out the podcast, that's another kind of where I'm really pouring myself into right now. And that's the Remind Her podcast. And you can type that into any search engine or any whatever your platform is that you use to listen to podcasts. You can type that in there, or you can also type my name and that'll come up. So, and then I have a website too. It's JulianneElaineClayton.com, and I have transcripts of the podcast there. So, yeah.
Well, I truly enjoyed this today.
Thanks.
And it was really good to meet you.
Yeah, you too. I know I've seen you on social media and in Hope Writers and stuff, but
Hope Writers is awesome, isn't it?
I love it.
So many different people on there.
I know. It's amazing. It's been such a gift for sure.
Well, thank you for being my third guest.
You're welcome. Thanks for inviting me.
We'll get better. Hopefully you'll come back.
Yeah. No, you're doing great. I truly do admire you for trying on this whole interview thing out. I think that's a really, really admirable
I thought I'd try it, all I can do is fail. And
Hey, everything's
do it again. So
everything's worth a try. So
we'll see. Well, thank you again.
Of course. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Talk to you later.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Well, that concludes today's Tuesday Talk. And I want to thank Julianne for coming on and sharing her encouraging message to remind us of God's presence and faithfulness in our lives. Her links will be posted in the show notes, so please go and look her up and listen to her future posts. And while I am talking about that, I just too want to let you know that I'm still in the process and I am lining up others for future episodes on here for Tuesday's Talk. And I am posting all of these episodes as I do them. I'm posting them on Facebook, and you can find the video and the audio on my Facebook page called Laura's View. And so go and look for that there if you want to watch it and listen to it. And if you have a God moment or someone you know has an inspiring story to share, please send me an email to laura@theviewfromlswindow.website. And while I'm on the roll, I'm asking you to please do me a big favor. If you enjoyed this episode, please look me up on Apple Podcasts And once you do, if you could, pop me one of those 5-star ratings and a written review. I'm finding that the more reviews I receive, the more this podcast becomes visible to others, and I really appreciate it. And I hope you have a great rest of the week. And I love you guys.